Welcome to Freaked Out with your co-host, Liz and Landon.
What's up, everybody? Well, welcome back to Freaked Out, where each episode we dive deep into some of the most perplexing unsolved cases in history.
Today, we will be talking to you guys about Las Cruces in New Mexico, where a seemingly ordinary day turned into one of the most horrific unsolved crimes in the state's history. Now, before we get into the details of today's case, I did want to mention something. I'm going to be tweaking a bunch of episodes on here. I'll be giving you guys less details about the case and more details about what we see. So this is the first go at that.
Well, I think, that's a great change because we do need some changes and everything is always moving. Also, please make sure to follow us on our YouTube channel, which is called Freaked Out Inc. We are talking publicly about some things connected to the Illuminati over there.
Dun, dun,
and
dun.
I know you guys will love that. So make sure to head over there, enjoy some of the cool content we've put out so far. This week, we will be covering the Britney Spears and her family attachment to the Illuminati,
which was dropped yesterday. If you do follow us on the YouTube channel, let us know in the comment section if you just started listening to us today. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Now, right now, back to this case. It is a case that has haunted Las Cruces for decades. Now, just a quick warning, today's episode discusses some graphic events involving some violence, so listener discretion is always advised.
It was February 10th, 1990. The morning just began in Las Cruces Bowl at a local bowling alley. Now, the manager, Stephanie Senek, was there with her 12-year-old daughter, Melissa Repass, and Melissa's friend, who was 13 years old, Amy Hauser.
Also present were two employees, Ida Holgan and Steve Turan, along with Steve's daughters, 2-year-old Valerie and 6-year-old Paula. They were setting up for the day, unaware of the horror that was about to unfold.
Now, around 8 a.m., two unidentified men entered into the bowling alley. Now, details about exactly what happened inside are horrifying. The men shot all 7 people, including all 4 of these children, and they stole approximately $5,000 from the safe. And then they set fire to the office, presumably to basically cover up their tracks.
Now, despite her critical injuries, Melissa Repass showed unimaginable courage as she was able to call 911 and provide the first alert to authorities about the nightmare that was beginning to unfold.
She had been shot at that point too, like she was so little. Anyways, her exact words were, "Please help us. We've been shot. They've gone now. Please hurry." When the first responder arrived, they encountered a scene of devastation. Now, Steve and his daughter Amy did not survive. Stephanie, Melissa, and Ida were critically injured, but survived.
Obviously, the investigation into the massacre began immediately. Police developed composite sketches of the suspects, described as Hispanic males, but despite extensive efforts and numerous tips over the years, the case still grew cold.
The impact of this event on Las Cruces community was profound. The bowling alley was a place that should be associated with family and fun, and it became a site of tragedy.
Every year, the community holds memorials to remember the victims and to remind people that the case is still unsolved. The hope is that someone, somewhere, might come forward with some information.
Advances in technology, especially in DNA analysis, give hope to law enforcement and the families affected. Now, they believe that one day these advances may help provide missing links to this unsolved case, but I'm not buying it. I don't feel like they're doing anything or even trying to do anything, you know?
It's a story of loss, but also resilience. The survivors, the families of the victims, and the community continue to hope for justice.
It's truly tragic and sad that this particular case is not the only place that these despicable human beings robbed in the past.
Well, let's get started with some of these questions. You had mentioned that they had robbed people in the past that they've previously murdered. Can you elaborate on that?
From what I gather, they normally robbed people from like gas stations, and I do see that they did sometimes have guns on them. I don't personally believe that they killed anyone, at least from what I gather, until they killed the people from the bowling alley. I feel like they would know, their area. They would go into the stores. I mean, it's the 90s. Not a lot of people at that point had cameras, so they could easily rob somebody, hold them at gunpoint, and get out without being ID'd in any way.
Do you know why they decided to specifically pick the Las Cruces bowling alley?
This is definitely personal. There are two different things I'm feeling. I'm feeling as though one of these people was definitely a disgruntled employee, may have gotten fired because of their unusual, odd behavior. I feel as though these men were able to disguise themselves pretty heavily, but I also feel like Stephanie, the manager, although she survived, she ended up dying 9 years later due to injury. But I also believe that injury was not the only thing that killed her. Like, I feel like she really knew and was heavily fearful of her life. She shows me that the person was technically born in El Salvador, but quite often spent a lot of time in Mexico. It's interesting because she whispered things a lot in my ear. She felt heavily responsible for everything that took place. She feels heavily responsible for everyone at the bowling alley dying. And I did talk to her and let her know that it obviously was not her fault, except the people who had done it.
Now, is it true that some people did know who it was, but were, too scared to come forward to say anything?
From what I gather, I feel as though some of the family members attached to the men definitely knew it was them. I feel as though they are protecting their son, their brother, their father. And I see a little woman, really the nicest woman, tiny, a little bit on the heavier set side, loves to make dough. She's wearing an apron, cooks for everyone, sweet, sweet lady. And her son scares her, so she didn't say anything.
Do we happen to know, like, his name, potentially a description of who he might be?
Edward or Eduardo. There's definitely the nickname Eddie or Ed. Definitely a pretty significantly heavy drinker, an extremely abusive personality. He is the one who really set up everything. Stephanie was the main reason he was going in and doing this. He was not anticipating the kids being there, but that didn't prevent him from killing them. He was aware of her schedule. I keep seeing a greasy white apron, perhaps someone who made fries, and I'm not referring to the main chef. And the second man, I feel like they were family. Maybe his father or an uncle, somebody in that family. Basically, somebody who knew their schedule, and this was completely intentional. This uncle or father didn't want to be involved in this, but I feel like once Eduardo kind of put that, hey, we can get some money out of this, then it was like, oh, okay, well, if I'm going to get money.
Now, do we know anything about this second guy that is involved in this?
So I know he's related, like I said, like a dad or an uncle. I'm also seeing them wearing masks. Maybe not even a mask, but maybe like a winter hat with like the eyes and the mouth cut out.
So, like a ski mask.
Yeah, something like that.
Did he have any issues with anyone at the bowling alley specifically?
So the uncle slash father figure, no. From what I gather, he was, like I said, just going along. I don't foresee any sort of violent nature attached to him, but I feel like when there's money involved, he's willing to do just about anything. He had received some sort of thrill from the financial. I also want to point out he was involved in robberies as well, but never got violent. And with the robbery, it wasn't, always doing anything bad, but definitely holding people at gunpoint.
So this guy basically just started shooting these people with no real motive.
From what I gather, they were going to have a good old time. It looks like they had the promise of some unlimited booze and drugs and, well, maybe some prostitutes. Things that are appealing to them. And, of course, unlimited food.
I mean, that's pretty disgusting and complete and total disregard for these other people's lives, especially these kids.
Oh, yeah, it is. And the other thing I want to mention in this case is that it's heavily weighing on me that the kids were, murdered because they should have been spared. In fact, I see that Stephanie, maybe a few others, were kind of suggesting to these guys, like, don't kill these kids. I saw that she offered everything under the sun, and this disgusting supposed human decided that they were going to do it for sport. Both of them could have just really walked away with the money, because there were people that survived. So why the fuck just not leave them all alone?
I mean, definitely, because, it's truly just sad and gross that, the 6-year-old Paula, along with her dad, that were just trying to find a daycare, were murdered at the scene. And then the baby that was only 2 years old, Valerie, was sadly rushed to the hospital, but declared dead on arrival.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't even imagine being a human being and looking at kids and thinking, oh, yeah, they're a threat to me. Let's kill them?
Yeah, like what is a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old really? How are they threatening you?
Right? Now, Paula and Valerie are with their father, and from what I gather from Paula, trying his hardest not to cry. Valerie didn't understand what the hell was going on, and she was crying, and they basically were trying to protect her, and she didn't want to follow into these footsteps with what these people were asking. Although Valerie was still alive when they, picked her up, I don't feel like she was conscious. I don't see she had any sort of feeling on any pain. A beautiful angel now, and she is still floating about. Her and her sister often help children cross over a little easier when it comes to some sort of trauma or massacre, anything in the same realm of what they dealt with.
So sadly, kind of like these children with these school shootings.
Yeah, pretty much.
I also want to point out that this shooting took place only 40 minutes outside of the Mexican border. Now, do you think there's anything connected to that at all? Like, is there a reason why it was so close?
Good question. I definitely feel as though these people had access to cross over very quickly into Mexico. And I think a little bit after the shooting took place, to lay low, they crossed over the border. And they knew that if they were able to do that, they wouldn't be caught.
Now, are they still in Mexico or are they back in the U.S.?
From the sounds of it, they're back in the US, both alive, still, running around. I do feel like they treat people horribly. The younger one still robbing people. I feel as though they gunned down a few people after this incident a few years later.
Jesus, they should not be able to be in the U.S.
No kidding.
Now, have the police ever seen these other crimes for these particular individuals?
Do you know what's crazy to me? Is that the location, and because the fact that there isn't a lot of care into these cold cases, there's a lot of really shitty cops in this area. If they had just run like ballistics, they could have easily obtained information to get them suspects. And although these people aren't actively murdering anyone anymore, I feel as though they are robbing people at gunpoint, or at least they were for a long time. And I feel like they could have easily put these pieces together and solved this crime and also obtained some sort of justice for these deaths. But it didn't matter to them enough.
It never does. And I mean, maybe I wouldn't say they're maybe doing it now. That would make them like what, in their like 70s?
One, I believe, is in his like 50s, 60s. The other one's in their like 90s now.
Yeah, definitely that 90-year-old. I highly doubt he's out there doing any of that.
No, probably pickpocketing, crotch pocketing, something, something like that.
Now, the bowling alley was owned by a man named Ron. Now, his daughter was Stephanie. She obviously was a manager at the bowling alley. Now, you mentioned that at least one of these people worked for this bowling alley at one point. Now, did they also know Ron as well?
From what I gather, I believe that although Ron owned it, I feel as though Stephanie took a big chunk of it, managed quite a bit. So I feel like he may have seen him once or twice, but this assailant's issue was with Stephanie directly.
A lot of people are confused as to why she didn't lock the door because the door was unlocked. So, pretty much anyone could just come in and out.
I feel as though Stephanie didn't necessarily think of it as a bad thing in case someone had come in, whether it be like a delivery for food or whatever the case may be. She did have a habit of leaving things unlocked so that people can easily access the bowling alley. Now, a lot of people were more so friendly that would, come, familiar faces. She didn't anticipate that anything was going to happen, obviously. If she had known that there was such a disgruntled situation that took place, she obviously would have locked the doors. She feels as though they would have gotten in there, though, one way or another, knocked down the door, something would have happened, but she's fairly confident that they would have found their way in one way or another.
One of the surviving people was Ida, who was the chef in the kitchen, and she was normally not even scheduled for this particular day shift, but her schedule had recently changed, and she explained about what happened inside that office. She said, I just thought they were going to get the money and then take off, especially when they told us all to put our heads down.
And I want to mention an unusual thing that took place. There was actually a little bit of money left. They haven't even disclosed the amount of money that was left. Like, why?
That's definitely something strange to happen because most of the time when you rob a place, you want to take all the money you can. Now, do we know why they ended up leaving some of the money behind?
I feel like it was accidentally left behind. I think they just, didn't intentionally plan to miss it because they are very money hungry, just missed out on that money. And I think they're probably pissed that they missed out on that money.
When Ida felt that she was shot in the head, she said in her interview for the documentary, she was the second one to get shot. She felt the gun right behind her head, and she knew she was next of the 7 victims that were lined up in the office floor and shot multiple times. A total of 25 shots were fired, many of them close range, to the suspects on the office floor. And then they set a fire as well and fled.
Obviously, everyone was scared as they were being shot at. They all knew it was over. These people were shooting them left, right, and center in the head. Stephanie shows me that she was one of the last people to be shot, and I believe that a statement or a comment made to her was like, "This is your fault."
Then they waited for a while and they asked Stephanie for the safe. So she opened it and she was getting the money and giving it to Melissa. Now, Melissa was putting in a suitcase. And Ida said she saw the suitcase. She said it was brown and they put a lot of money in there and then they started shooting. And then when they shot Ida in the arm, she didn't even know. She thought it was Amy that got shot and she thought that they shot her and the blood splatter got on her because it was not hot. Then they shot Ida in the shoulder and that went through her into the computer. And then they told them all to put their heads down and they started shooting again.
It is like so disheartening. They just had no idea what in the hell was going on, scared shitless because these men are older. And then the other, I feel like, he's obviously in his 90s. I think somebody's taking care of him, though, somewhere. Maybe a nursing home of some sorts.
I would definitely like to know what nursing home.
Right? He deserves a very violent death.
Absolutely. Now, they did set up roadblocks about an hour after everything has happened, which you could get anywhere in an hour.
Right? They should have been blocked at the border. I believe that, they were long gone by the time anything happened. These guys were well on their way to escaping with zero consequences ahead of them.
Now, from what I gather, they did do border patrols and helicopter patrols as well. But like you said, it was a little too late. I definitely think that as well. They were just quickly heading over the border, hiding there. And it's easy to hide in Mexico because they don't really, govern too well over there.
Absolutely, and they're not going to care, honestly. Now let's talk about Ida for a moment. She's had several gunshot wounds, including one to the back of her head, and she survived. She died in the ambulance and then came back, and she doesn't remember much other than the fact that her head was still smoking from the gunshot wound.
I couldn't even imagine. Now, do we know why these men killed these people?
I feel like they did it because they were afraid that they were going to be witnesses and they got paranoid. They didn't want to risk anyone pointing anything out. I know that Ida remembered a lot of information, but I feel as though because she was shot in the head, a lot of that information, drifted, definitely blacked out quite a bit. Then again, she might not even honestly want to talk about it either because it might be very scary and traumatizing. Probably scared that these people are going to come back and get her and finish the job,
I mean, I wouldn't blame her. I also feel like she definitely did not know what was going to happen on this capacity. Now, perhaps the trauma was too much for her to remember anything.
I mean, smoking head and, it's truly a shame. I did want to mention as well, Eileen randomly popped up indicating she is now officially going to spook them and haunt their asses because she knows exactly who they are and where to go and find them. She just wanted everyone to know she's going to take care of business, so she just wanted to randomly let everyone know that. So if anyone now randomly just drops dead, you know why.
Well, our last question for tonight is, do you believe that this case will ever get solved?
What drives me crazy is they keep mentioning when it comes to this case that they're waiting for advancements before they move forward. No, we have advancements. You guys are not putting in the efforts to obtain the advancements, the funding, whatever you need. I'm sure if you went and reached out to people and were like, look, we need to be able to do this. Let's get a fundraiser going. Let's do something. I just feel like they're keeping quiet for a reason, I do believe that every single case in the entire world will eventually get solved one day, as much as it can anyway, at least cases that are sitting cold and unsolved. But I do believe this case will eventually get solved. I just feel like it's going to be 30, 40 years down the line. I don't see it happening anytime soon. I really wish that these people would put all their effort into getting this case solved.
Well, thank you for that. Now, next week, we will be dropping the very long anticipated Chester Bennington episode.
Woohoo!
I know. I definitely cannot wait for this one. I've been waiting a long time.
Chester and Tupac on YouTube. Big, big week. We also have the episode of Heyman Lee. We've got a lot going on in the next couple of weeks. So Heyman Lee's bonus will happen, but we're most likely going to be releasing it in June. So just so you guys are aware. I just need to find a little bit more time.
Absolutely. We got a lot of things coming. Chester is definitely going to be a big episode, so make sure your guys' Patreon is updated on Podbean and your exclusive site is ready to go. Make sure you're also paying that $5 subscription fee because all episodes are now $5.
All the new episodes are $5.
Yes.
Anything for season 1, 2, and 3 is all $2. Anything for season 4 is $5 or more.
A lot of you guys have been wondering why you can't hear some of them, and that's probably why.
And for those of you that are not attached to our Facebook group, I did want to mention what's coming out for June, so you guys have a heads up. We are covering all these really cool special episodes, including the Hollywood Tower of Terror, which I am so excited to cover. Long anticipated Twitch boss episode, which, by the way, all this shit is now coming out about his murder.
Right? Which we've been talking about this for such a long time.
Right? We know that he's been murdered. And
yeah, we knew he did not commit suicide. We knew that the day it happened.
Right? And we had this up as a bonus for so long. We never got there. So we're pulling it off the bonus list and we're going to make it happen.
Absolutely. I've been super excited. I've been dying to do this one. A lot of you say, oh, you think you can come to me and suggest a case, and Liz is going to do it because I say so. I have been begging for Twitch, and she still wouldn't do it. So I am just as excited.
I don't like breaking rules, but anyway. We are also going to be doing a revamping of Summer Wells. I feel like there's so much more to talk about when it comes to the sex trafficking side of things. We're going to get downright dirty in this episode yet again, and I cannot wait to share all the new details I have on this case.
We also will be covering Sharon Tate, which is a very, very heavy episode. That's connected to the Charles Manson, and that one will be one of the first that we will cover on this side of things. It's going to be truly crazy. You guys are definitely not going to want to miss that one either.
Right. We are stepping it up in these cases in 2024. Now, my goal was obviously to continue to keep bringing more and more. But last but certainly not least is our Jack the Ripper series, part 3, and I can give you guys a little information on that. I thought that Dark Annie was nuts, but just you wait until I share all the details about what happened with crazy, twisted Jack the Ripper. And I never thought I'd anticipate a twist so weird and crazy. It'll be exciting to hear, and I cannot wait to share.
Until next time, guys, stay freaked out.